Hello and welcome to Cycling Insights, the podcast presented by L'Etape Australia by Tour de France. Matthew Keenan with you, as always, joined by Simon Gerrans. And Gero, we've got plenty to get through as we lead in towards the Giro d'Italia, a race that I know sits pretty fondly in your memories.
Yeah, really looking forward to the Giro d'Italia. It's such an exciting time in the season. We've just had the Classics campaign for many, many riders. There's some racing that's been happening here in Australia, and now we've got the Giro to look forward to in the coming weeks. So there's a lot on the calendar.
As part of our look at the Giro, we're going to look back at the Giro, 2004, Brad McGee. At this point, you hadn't joined the pro peloton yet. Brad finished first in the prologue, got the leader's jersey, ended up 8th overall. What were your visions or memories of Brad at that point in his career?
Well, I have really fond memories of watching Brad duke it out at the Giro d'Italia that year. I was living in France myself. I was renting a room off someone that was really close to Brad McGee, so I was following his progress intensely. And just to see Brad battle it out there every day, racing for a French team. There were a few Aussies in the race that year. I remember Trent Wilson being in there, Russell Van Hout. And Brad had Matt Wilson by his side. So there were plenty Aussies to cheer from. And it was just great to see this Aussie battler really duking it out with what were the legends of Italian cycling at that point in time.
It was a huge result by Brad. So we're going to catch up with Brad McGee a little bit later on. We're also going to speak to somebody whose dad you and I both used to ride with. We were traumatised, well, I was anyway, by Hayden Bradbury because he was one of the super strong riders on the domestic scene when I was racing. But his 19-year-old daughter, Neve, is going to be our one to watch. Can you believe, Gero, that somebody can make it to the pro peloton via the Zwift Academy?
Well, that's the world we're racing these days, Matt. I think we've seen there's a couple of different pathways for young ladies and men that can show some potential on Zwift to World Tour teams. So it's really great to see there's just another pathway, and it's a great way of unearthing new talent.
And as always, we're going to have a chat with Spratt. Amanda Spratt on the back of her spring campaign. We'll catch up with her as she looks back at the season so far and then what comes next. You've been out doing a fair bit of riding yourself lately, Gero, and particularly with the Chain Reaction charity group.
Yeah, that's right, Matt. I was up in New South Wales just last weekend to join the Chain Reaction Challenge Foundation for the last couple of days of their New South Wales ride. So I joined them in Forster, made our way down to Newcastle and then on to Sydney. A couple of weeks prior to that, I also joined the Chain Reaction Victorian ride for the last couple of days from Nagambie to Marysville and then into Melbourne. So yeah, clocking up some consistent riding these days and really enjoying being a part of this great group in the Chain Reaction Challenge Foundation, which is an association, charity they've been associated with for a large number of years now.
Oh, they do an amazing job, the Chain Reaction crew. They put on a really slick event and they raise a great amount of funds, particularly for children's health issues to be able to deal with and research around that area. Another big event that was on last weekend, for me, it felt like it was the rebirth of the Melbourne to Warrnambool as the premier one-day race on the calendar. Was it 2003 that you won it?
Yeah, 2003, I won the Melbourne to Warrnambool. It was my second attempt at the race. Managed to make the select group there in the final. I think there was about 6 or 7 riders. Jumped away in the closing kilometres and soloed to victory. And so for me, that was probably my first breakout one-day win. I was sort of 23 years of age. I was in really good company in the final. So to show that I could sort of perform on such a long, hard race, probably gave me a lot of confidence into the sort of long races that were coming in my career.
The race has been around since 1895. On the weekend was the first time that we've had any sort of live broadcast of it with vision. Previously, I think since 1971, they'd had the last 25Ks live on the local radio with Lindsay Hill doing the commentary. But I got to commentate on it with David McKenzie, and it was fantastic to be able to call that race because it's a race that means so much to us as part of the Australian cycling community. And Jensen Plowright, he was the one who won it. There was really good weather conditions. The race was pretty fast. With 3 or 4 Ks to go, if I was in his earpiece, I would have said, Jensen, sit on, back yourself. You can win the sprint. Gero, he attacked with a K to go and he won solo.
Well, Jensen Plowright is a very strong sprinter, so it would only be normal that his director would be in his earpiece saying, sit back, play it cool, you're going to stitch these guys up in a sprint. So for him to attack in the final, and from what I understand, it was his first attempt at the Melbourne to Warrnambool, so I imagine his first time racing a race of that length, He obviously had a huge amount of confidence going into the final. Must have been feeling really good.
267 kilometres, and he's a guy who's kind of on the long list for the team's pursuit. 4 kilometres for the Paris Olympics in 2024. I reckon he's getting a little further up the batting order, and international teams should be taking a look at him. He also gives a great interview after the race, and on the topic of should he have attacked when he did or waited, he said, "When I went, I knew it was a ballsy move, but I just went with it."
Oh, good on him. And it's so good to see young guys racing in that way. It's like all or nothing. If they pull it off, it's obviously a fantastic result. If they don't, they sort of crash and burn, for no better phrase. So really good result by him. A race with so much history. When I first got back to Australia late last year, I participated in the 125th anniversary of the Melbourne to Warrnambool ride. So I rode the entire course, close to the original course, with a group of guys. Next weekend, I'm going to be doing the first edition of the gravel version of the Melbourne to Warrnambool. So that's going to be 260 kilometres, predominantly on gravel. So that's going to be a whole new adventure to take on.
I won't be with you. I'll wait for the report. That is bonkers. In the women's race, Matilda Reynolds won the women's race for the second year running, and the weather conditions were pretty good, and Matilda was right there amongst the men, along with two other women as well who made it to the podium. There was also Justine Barrow in second position, Nicole Frayne in third place. They were there with the men until around about 15 Ks to go on one of the last climbs. And I used to be of the view that we should have a men's race and a women's race. We've got to put on a women's race, but there's only 10 or so riders that enter, and that wouldn't make for much of a race. And in the interview afterwards, Matilda spoke about the fact that she loves the opportunity to race with the men, and she's not a female cyclist and they're not male cyclists, they're just cyclists. And I now like the idea of this being a unique race that has the men and women together.
Yeah, why not? And particularly with only 10 female participants lining up, it would be crazy to have 10 ladies roll out on their own when you've got a group of potentially 150 guys rolling out together as well. So why not line them all up together? And I tell you what, I think there'd be probably a few egos coming to the finish with the guys there wanting to finish in front of all the ladies in the race, but that would be no easy task.
Yeah, plenty of them didn't. Some other news that has happened over the last month or so that really caught my attention. I know it's a little while ago now, but I wanted to talk about it and get your perspective. The return of Mark Cavendish to the winner's dice. 4 stage wins in the Tour of Turkey, 3 of them in a row.
Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that most people had written Mark Cavendish off. Nobody thought he was going to get up there for another win again this year, but the Koenig Quickstep have played it really well. They sent him off to the Tour of Turkey there. It wasn't a really deep field. There wasn't a big lineup of all-star sprinters. They put him there with a great lead-out train, and he was able to come away with 4 stage wins. So that's going to really bolster his confidence, and I think the confidence of his teammates as well. So I imagine Mark Cavendish is going to get plenty more support now.
Yeah, and I also think that when he does choose to retire, given it had been, I think, 3 years since his previous win, he'll now feel like when he does stop racing, that he stopped on his own terms, nobody else's.
Yeah, so now Mark Cavendish moving forward, he's not lining up at the upcoming Giro d'Italia. Would you take Mark Cavendish to the Tour de France to chase that elusive Eddie Merckx record?
Probably not, because you've got Sam Bennett on the team. And you can't have both Sam Bennett and Mark Cavendish on the same team, can you, at the Tour?
No, you can't. I think I saw one race earlier in the year where Mark Cavendish and Sam Bennett were at the front for a sprint finish, and they botched it up spectacularly. So I don't think they're two sprinters that can work well together, and I think it would be a very nervous Sam Bennett if Mark Cavendish was to be selected in the Koenig Quickstep team. So for Sam's sake, I hope they don't take it.
Imagine making that call as the sports director. Okay, Sam, we know you won a couple of stages at the Tour last year. Yeah, you won the green jersey. You're not going. Mark Cavendish is instead. I can't see that conversation happening.
Well, I don't think they could not take Sam Bennett, but if they were to take Mark Cavendish as well, because Mark Cavendish, he draws a lot of attention.
Huge.
Like he draws a lot of press. I think that's his big sort of draw card in going to a team these days. So, if they're there chasing him publicity, maybe they'll consider putting him in the roster. But I hope for Sam Bennett's sake, that's not going to happen.
Watch this space. So another one of the old stalwarts, 4-time Tour de France winner Chris Froome. He's still searching for his form. It's a completely different beast for Froome by comparison to Cavendish as a sprinter. But would he look at that and get a little bit of confidence of, okay, just stick to the path, stay on the program you're on?
Well, I think Chris Froome is going to take that approach regardless. He's just going to keep sticking to his path, sticking to his plan. But unfortunately for Froome, he's not showing a great deal of progression so far. You know, he's sort of started the season in fairly mediocre form by Chris Froome standards, and he hasn't really improved. I think if we were going to see a competitive Chris Froome back at the Tour de France, he would have shown a little bit more by now. But I'm not taking any joy in seeing Froome struggle, but there's sure a lot of people are.
Yeah, I'm really struggling with some of the people that are having real joy online in watching Froome struggle. There's been one Twitter account that's been set up about, when will Froome be dropped, or has he been dropped yet? Something along those lines. And it's kind of like going to the football and listening to people boo. I just don't get it.
Unfortunately, I think it's a real sort of tall poppy syndrome. People love, or so many people love to see someone who's been so successful fail. But what we got to just reflect a little bit on where Froome has come from in the past couple of years. The fact that he broke his leg, he had such a horrific crash at the Dauphiné there a couple of years ago. He nearly died. So for him just to get back on the bike and get back to racing again is already a massive achievement. And I'd love to see him do well, but it seems a little way off at this stage.
Yeah, I'd love to see him win a mountain stage. Regardless, if he loses time on GC, get in an early breakaway and win a stage in the mountains. That's all to come. The Tour de France is off in the distance. Next up, though, very just much around the corner, is the Giro d'Italia. So, Gero, let's take a look at the Giro. For you, the Giro d'Italia played a pretty big role in your career. A stage win there, the leader's jersey as well. What did the Tour of Italy mean to you?
Well, the Tour of Italy was such an amazing race because there are probably no more passionate spectators anywhere than at Italy for the Giro d'Italia. They just love the race. The whole country turns pink for the Giro. They get so behind it. And there's some really passionate fans and enthusiastic racing, some often really aggressive racing at the Giro. I participated in the Giro on 2 occasions. Once in 2009, where I was fortunate enough to walk away with a stage win, and again in 2015, where I wore the pink jersey for a stage off the back of a team time trial victory with the Green Edge team. So I have some very fond memories at the Tour of Italy, but it's not a race that I lined up in too many occasions.
Okay, so let's take a look at, why don't we take a look at the sprinters first, and then we'll take a look at who can potentially win the pink jersey, the Maria Rosa. And obviously, Caleb Ewan is going there. And I'm anticipating that Caleb will do the sort of thing that Robbie McEwen used to do. He'll go perhaps for the first 2 weeks, try and pick up a couple of stage wins, go home, get ready for the Tour.
I agree with you 100%. I think Caleb has sort of said his objective for the 2021 season is to win a stage in all 3 Grand Tours. And so there's no way he'll be looking to make it all the way to the finish in the Giro if he still has ambitions of, obviously winning stages at the Tour de France and then backing up by winning stages at the Vuelta a España. So I agree. Caleb will line up there. He will have already pinpointed his exit from the race. He'll understand when he's going to get home with enough time to freshen up again and prepare properly for the Tour de France.
I think the stages that Caleb can win, the first day is a short time trial, and then I think Caleb can win stage 2, 5, 7, 10, 13, then go home.
I don't imagine he would go any further than stage 13 in the Giro, because it's actually when you go past that point, that's when you get that ongoing, that residual fatigue that can last for weeks and weeks and weeks. So after 2 weeks of racing, I think he'll definitely head home and think about what's coming up after that. But he's not short on competition, Matt. There are a number of big-name sprinters with a point to prove at this upcoming Giro.
We've got Giacomo Nizzolo. He's won the points classification at the Giro d'Italia without winning a stage there. We've got Peter Sagan, and there's a few lumpy sort of stages like stage 3, which will suit Peter Sagan. We have Elia Viviani, who's still searching for form at his new team at the Cofidis squad. Fernando Gaviria, if he's on, I think he's the biggest rival for Caleb Ewan. Tim Muller with the Alpecin Phoenix team. And the big story for me is the return of Dylan Groenewegen. After the horrible crash last year in the Tour of Poland, which involved Fabio Jakobsen, Groenewegen was listed at the start of the year as not riding one of the Grand Tours. I think they were just trying to keep the heat off him. But he's going to this race. And Jumbo Visma, they're also fighting for the general classification with George Bennett. but they've got David Decker there as maybe the second sprinter, maybe as the lead-out man. But Dylan Groenewegen going to be a big story amongst the sprinters in this race.
Absolutely. So Groenewegen, I think, had a 9-month suspension that he's coming back from at the Giro d'Italia. So he's going to come back, obviously fresh, raring to go with a point to prove. And like I said earlier, there are a number of sprinters here with a point to prove. I think Peter Sagan is going to want to show that he can mix it with the best guys again. Viviani still got a point to prove with Cofidis. Gaviria, he's racing with UAE Team Emirates, which is obviously sponsored by the UAE, but the heritage of that team is Italian. A lot of the staff will be Italian. So many of the riders will be Italian. So he is going to want to go to the Giro d'Italia and win stages as well.
Yeah, it's a big battle. Looking forward to seeing how Caleb Ewan compares up against those other sprinters. Now for the general classification. Let's start with the Australian. Let's start with Jai Hindley. He was second last year. He's got a new teammate with him, Romain Bardet, who's been second at the Tour de France, third at the Tour de France, and Bardet has always really wanted to ride the Giro. Now that he's not on a French team, he gets the chance to do so. If you're the sports director, are you just waiting for the mountains to sort out which one of those two guys is the leader, or you're making a call early?
Well, funnily enough, just yesterday evening, I was chatting with Nicholas Roach, and he's lining up in the team with Bardet and Hindley. And I said, how are you guys going to play it out with the two GC riders? And he sort of said, well, we're going in with two leaders. What so often happens in a Giro d'Italia, the GC hierarchy sorts itself out because it's such a long, hard race. There are so many GC riders that go into this race and have mishaps throughout the first 2 weeks. So it's great to go in with two options. Hindley and Bardet are getting along really well. Bardet is really enjoying going into a new environment at Team DSM. So I think the two will work well together there.
And ironically, last year, Hindley went in as the number 2 guy with Wilco Kelderman as the number 1 guy for the team. And Hindley ended up second and Kelderman ended up third overall. I think probably the big favourite, if he's on the form he was a couple of years ago, Egan Bernal, the Colombian with Ineos, and he's got a super strong team around him.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think Bernal is an out-and-out favourite for this race. I love to see George Bennett on the podium. I think it's a Giro d'Italia that suits him quite well. And why not Landa as well? There is very few kilometres of time trialling in this Giro. It's a flat sort of just under 30k time trial to finish. So if Landa can get enough time on these mountains, maybe he can hang on for a podium finish in the overall.
What about across at your old team, Bike Exchange, and Simon Yates?
Well, Simon Yates, again, he's a proven performer in Grand Tours. We've seen him perform really well in the Giro a couple of years ago. He's won a Vuelta a España. He's got a pretty sort of solid lineup around him, a real mixed team with not too many guys that are going to get too many opportunities. I think it'll all be about Simon, but he hasn't been the most consistent performer of late, so it'd be interesting to see how he backs up over the 3 weeks.
One of the riders that I'm most looking forward to seeing in action is Remco Evenepoel. The prodigal climber, time trialist, just about anything from Belgium, riding with the Deceuninck Quick-Step team. He has not raced since his horrific crash at the Giro Lombardia last year. So I've got no idea what sort of form he's in. But I think it was just a couple of weeks ago that he signed a 5-year contract with the Deceuninck Quick-Step. They're backing him. They're not taking one of their sprinters. They're in for the general classification.
Well, they also have Almeida there as well, the Portuguese rider who performed really well for the Deceuninck Quick-Step in last year's Giro. So they're going in with a GC team, which is unusual for the Deceuninck Quick-Step squad. They have some real experience in the lineup as well. We'll be interesting to see how Evenepoel goes. But with no racing in his legs since his horrific crash last year at Lombardia, I think a rider of his age will struggle to go the distance because you need kilometres in your legs, particularly as a young rider going into a Grand Tour.
And Mr. Experience, Vincenzo Nibali, he's back. He's had some injury problems leading up to this, had to have his arm put into a cast. I think Vincenzo will shape the overall classification of the top 3, but I don't think he can win it.
We haven't spoken about another rider, Vlasov, too much. The young Russian rider in the Astana team. He's a very exciting young talent. We saw him, I think he was second in Paris-Nice earlier this year. He's been a really consistent performer in the mountains. I'm really excited to see what he can do over the course of 3 weeks.
Okay, who's going to win?
For me, Bernal is an out-and-out favourite to win. And like I said, after that, I'd love to see George Bennett there, and I think he can sort of wrap up a podium, hopefully second place. And then I have Landa as a third place on the podium. So there's my top 3. How about you, Matt?
Well, I agree with Egan Bernal. I'd love to see George Bennett get on the podium, and I'd like to see Jai Hindley back up from last year and also reach the podium. But I'm going to go Bernal, Bennett, Hindley.
Well, I think all those three guys will be right up there.
Okay, and if that's not enough for you, we're going to recommend another podcast for you to have a listen to. Max Gawn, the captain of the Melbourne Football Club in the AFL, was a guest on the Stanley Street Social, and he didn't give his top 3, he didn't give his top 5, and he didn't give his top 10 in the general classification. Gero, he gave his top 38.
Why on earth did he stop at 38? That's what I want to know.
Why not go all the way?
Why not go all the way? There's about 200 riders in there.
And you can watch the Giro live on SBS. It's back on SBS for the first time in around about 5 years, starting from the 8th of May through to the 30th. Cycling Insights is brought to you by L'Etape Australia by Tour de France. L'Etape Australia is the only Tour de France event in Australia and provides riders of all levels with the thrill of riding on fully closed roads, just like at the Tour. I've been part of the event since 2016, and it's always a highlight of my season, obviously just after the Tour. Join me in Kiama at the end of the year to experience the Tour de France atmosphere right here in Australia. For more information, visit letapeaustralia.com. It's LETAPE Australia.com. Gero, it's now time for our chat with Spratt, Amanda Spratt, and the spring campaign for Spratty didn't go quite according to plan. She was suffering from a stomach bug before the start of the Liège-Bastogne-Liège, could hardly keep any food down, and finished 11th. That's pretty impressive.
That's a very impressive result for Amanda. These races are really taxing. They're really long. They're really hard. So as a minimum, you need to be in good health at the start, even if you're not in good form. Obviously, Amanda was in fantastic form, so it would have been bitterly disappointed to get sick right before the race. But to still back it up with an 11th place on the day is a phenomenal result.
Here she is, Amanda Spratt. Time for our regular chat with Spratt. And Spratty, I was commentating on the Liège-Bastogne-Liège, one of your big targets every year for the season. Beforehand, I thought, fingers crossed, Spratty could be on. And then you just didn't look quite right throughout the race. You finished 11th position. I thought, just not her day. But then I read the social media update from you the next day. It was a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't quite at my normal level or normal self. I'd been up since 3 a.m. the day of Liège with really bad stomach guts. So spare you the major details, but basically everything. Well, yeah, I didn't have much stay in my body for a good 24 hours, and you can imagine a day like Liège. It's a hard race in itself, let alone if you've got something like that to deal with. So yeah, I mean, we did what we could before the race. I started and it didn't get much better during the race. So it was just more about survival and try to see what I could do. I really wanted to finish the race. But it was not pretty during the race either. Had a few stops. It was, it did not end well. I can't wish that upon anyone.
I wish I had have known that before the race, before we were commentating on it, and get a bit of context, because we were covering it on SBS with Bridie O'Donnell, Robbie McEwen, and myself. And on La Redoute, you missed the split, and Robbie asked the question, is that just she was just in the wrong spot at the wrong time, or does she not quite have the legs? And I said, I just think she's not having a great day. It turns out I was kind of right, but you really weren't having a great day.
No. I was in all sorts there. And particularly just before the La Redoute, actually, Yannicka went back to the car to try and see if there's anything they could do for me. We're at 10K. We know we're coming into the hardest point in the race, and you've got these sort of issues. And there's not much you could do at that point. Try to get through it. But La Redoute was a real low moment for sure. I went backwards up there. And the team kept rallying around me and trying to say, we just suffer, we see what we can do. And I had, great support from the car and from Yannicka and Anne especially. But it was pretty horrible out there for me.
So there are different ways to measure success. Obviously the result sheet tells one story. You win a race, that's a great day out. But that Liège, you finished 11th. You had all those obstacles to deal with. I mark that down as a really huge achievement.
Yeah, I think, with a little bit of perspective and time, then I'm coming to realize that was a pretty good result given the circumstances. It's still just it is just really disappointing because that was my biggest goal, and I knew at Amstel the legs were good. At Flesh, I was actually really happy with my race in Flesh. It was one of my best results there. So we knew everything was on track for Liège. Also, the way it happened, Demi Vollering had been quite vocal about wanting a smaller group where she could sprint from. So yeah, it's easy to say I could have been there. We don't know, but I really feel like where the form was at, I could have been there going for the win.
On Demi Vollering and her getting the win. So she was out in that select group out in front. There was 5 out in front. One of them was her teammate, Anna van der Breggen, world champion, recently won Flèche Wallonne for the 7th time. How much pressure was on Vollering to get a 10-kilometre lead out from the world champion?
Yeah, nothing like a little bit of pressure when you're in that situation. But how awesome was that though? I just
Yeah.
think for me, Anna van der Breggen is one of the people, probably alongside Marianne Vos. Anna's one of the people that I look up to the most, just in terms of how much of a team player she is, and how she could easily have won that race herself, I think, and she chose in that moment to repay Demi for what Demi had done at Flèche Wallonne. Only a few days earlier, and for me that just says what a champion Anna is. And yeah, pretty cool for Demi that she could get her first monument win. I think it's her first World Tour win as well after that. So certainly she's shown she can perform under pressure as well.
So on Anna van der Breggen, I don't really know her. I've only seen her in interviews and been involved, I think, in 1 or 2 interviews that she's been part of. And that's not the real environment where you get to know somebody. What's her presence like within the peloton? She seems quiet, but there's an air about her that looks pretty confident.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. She's just quiet. She's not looking for the spotlight. You'll see it on her social media. She's not on there all the time posting everything that she's doing. I'm sure she's doing a lot of amazing things out riding and training, but just a really nice, down to earth person. But yeah, you see her in the peloton. There's always that respect for her, and she's just a really respectful rider as well. She won't be chopping anyone, or a lot of the time you'll see her just cruising at the back of the bunch. But it's one of those things, whenever you see Anna moving to the front, then everyone's on the radio saying, quick, Anna's at the front of the peloton. It's like panic. Everyone knows something's about to happen.
I can imagine that is the case. So after Liège-Bastogne-Liège, I guess that's sort of the conclusion of the first phase of the season for you?
Yeah, exactly. So that finished off the first phase of the season, and then the day after we went together as an Australian national team to go and recon the course for the World Championships in the Flanders area. So that was
What do you think?
very cool to see. I was in all sorts of pain, but I got on the bike anyway. It's an amazing course. I think it's like no other World Championship course I can remember at all. It's going to be a really open course, very, very
Cobbles?
exciting. And we have one circuit with a cobbled sector, sort of halfway through the race, and then we finish on an extremely technical course. I think there's 29 corners per lap in the finish circuit, over 15k, I think it is, one corner every 500 meters. So I think it's going to be very exciting, very open, and like no other course I've ever seen for World Championships.
David McKenzie and Christophe Mallet did an interview recently with Grace Brown, and they didn't put any pressure on her at all. They said, you can win the world title in the Flanders region in Belgium and then go and win the first Paris-Roubaix in the rainbow jersey. What do you think?
Yeah, easy. I think. No, in all.
It's actually possible.
It's 100% possible, and it's been so exciting as well in the classic season to see how much Grace has stepped up and the results that she's had, and I really believe that come September she will be one of the real world champion gold medal contenders, and I'm really hoping to be there to support her for that.
On a completely different topic, this has just come to mind because Simon and I spoke about it at the start. The Melbourne to Warrnambool. It was on the weekend just gone. We had the live broadcast of it. The women's race was won by Matilda Reynolds, and there were 3 women in the group that she was in. Justine Barrow was another one who you know pretty well, and Nicole Frame. And before the start of that Melbourne to Warrnambool, or before the post-race interview with Matilda, I thought it'd be great to have a men's race and a women's race. And then afterwards, Matilda spoke about the fact that it was sensational, being in the race, all the men were really respectful, and she wasn't a female cyclist, and they weren't male cyclists, they were just cyclists. And she's actually got me over the line of thinking, let's keep it how it is. Let's have the men and the women together for the warning.
Yeah, I actually love that idea. And I really believe that sometimes that that just brings that extra element of challenge as well. And I think you're right. Yeah, I know my experience racing with men, they've always been quite respectful, and it's not like men, women, like, oh, you can't go in this group or anything like that. And I just think the challenge of lining up and having one big mass start and just challenging yourself, seeing how far you can get through, and what group you end up in. I reckon that's really cool.
I reckon we might see you on the start line at the end of your career.
I'm pretty sure that's on my bucket list. I get really excited about this. Yeah, we had a chat recently now, just in a team dinner table, talking about doing a big bike packing trip, or going out and doing an 8-hour ride or a 9-hour ride, and everyone on the table said they do not want to do that. And my eyes were just lighting up and saying, "Oh, that would be so awesome! I love the idea of doing that." So I think I'm definitely up for that kind of challenge.
And your brother was pretty good in the Warnie on the weekend.
Yeah, that was really exciting. I managed to wake myself up and watch the last part of that, and yeah, so nice. He ended up finishing, I think it was 22nd. He was in that, in
He
the
was in
big bunch just
he
behind.
was in the main group. Yeah, he was
Yeah,
rock
just
solid.
behind Sam Welsford. Yeah, just behind Sam Welsford. So that was pretty cool, and just knowing he's had so many health issues the last 10 plus years and worked so hard for this race, first non-NRS rider to finish, and he won A grade. So Dad was down there as well, Chief Swanee. So that was really, really cool, and yeah, really proud moment for everyone that knows him.
Sensational. What's next for you?
Next up for me is I've got another week or so of training, and then I'm off to Spain. We have 2 one-day races, and then we have a Volta Burgos, which is a 4-day tour. So yeah, getting excited for that. That's sort of the next World Tour race. And Anna, our Spanish I should say Basque, our Basque, my Basque teammate
Get it right.
and Spanish climber. She'll kill me for that. Yeah, she's this is her home turf. She's really looking forward to these races, so I'm really looking forward to going there and supporting her in those races.
It is a beautiful region. In a couple of moments, I'm going to catch up with Neve Bradbury as our one to watch. She's only 19 years of age. She's riding with Canyon Tram, so she's made it into the World Tour, courtesy of the Zwift Academy. It's a different world when you're coming from an indoor platform into racing outdoors. I don't think you've raced with her yet, but what are the reports coming back to you?
Yeah, but I think she's really impressing. I actually caught up with Tiff Cromwell, who's also in Canyon Tram recently, and sort of asked Tiff how it's been going, and she said, yeah, she's really impressed so far. I think, as you said, there's always that time where you don't know how it's going to go from Zwift online platform into the racing peloton. But from all reports, she's handled the bunch really well. I've seen some clips of races where she's been on the front and chasing things down, and even being in a breakaway. So I think she's doing a really nice program as well, from what I hear, in terms of different races, and the team are challenging her in different ways. But I think she is definitely one that's going to be successful over in Europe if she wants it. And certainly she started off really, really well. So yeah, really exciting for the future of Australian women's cycling here.
Here's a little insight into her as a person. Keep in mind that she's just 19 years of age and she's just joined the World Tour. I sent her the message to say, are you available to do this interview on the podcast, and what time would suit you? She said, yeah, happy to do it. How about 10 a.m. my time? And I wrote back, yep, that's fine. 24 hours later, I get another message from her. Oh, sorry, doesn't that mean you'd have to get up at 6 a.m. to do the interview? Do you want to change times? So she got the time. She got the timing wrong. It actually works out 6 p.m., which is perfect for me. But the fact that she was thinking about the impact on somebody else that is asking her for a favor.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. I don't think I would have thought about that at that age. So yeah, it shows how mature she already is, I think.
I'm 46 and I hadn't thought about it.
It makes me feel a bit better.
Spratty, good luck with the next phase in the season. And at some point, we'll have you and Nick, the following stage of the Sprat Cup in the Melbourne and Warrnambool.
Exactly. Look forward to it. Thanks, Matt.
From Amanda Spratt, one of Australia's current stars of the sport, we're now going to take a look back to 2004 in the Giro d'Italia with one of our retired stars, Brad McGee. And Gero, Brad McGee, his record, it is pretty exceptional when you look at it both across the track and the road.
Yeah, outstanding bike rider, Brad. They're very complete. Like you said, we saw him win Olympic gold medals. He was the first Australian to wear the leaders jersey in all 3 Grand Tours, and he really has a place in cycling history in Australia. One of the all-time greats for me.
Here he is, Brad McGee. Well, we're now joined by Brad McGee. And Brad, for a guy who first made his reputation racing for less than 4 minutes on the velodrome, you did pretty well across 3 weeks at the Giro d'Italia in 2004.
Yes, but it wasn't your standard attack on an overall GC outcome for a pro bike rider. It was quite different.
Well, how so? Because obviously, your reputation was like Matt said there for less than 4 minutes, and you have an outstanding track record of prologues at the Giro d'Italia. I was just looking earlier, a first place, a second place, and a third place in the prologue, and a second place in a team's time trial opener. What was the approach? How was the approach different in 2004?
Well, you're almost right on the money there. I approached the prologue and for the 2004 Giro, but I wasn't looking much beyond that. In fact, get down, get the jersey, enjoy the limelight, and then get out of there. In fact, I had a ticket booked about 10 days into the Giro. I was due to absolutely, without question, exit the Giro. I was heading back to my hometown of Monaco for none other than I had tickets to the Grand Prix. So I was not looking at finishing that Giro. I was focused on the prologue. Then once I read the book, literally read the book, the race book on arrival to Genoa there, I didn't really look much beyond the prologue at all. And then I think we thought, oh, maybe there's a couple of stages I can have a crack at. And then by the time it came time to leave, I think I was still in third place on GC. And it was like, you can't leave now. Let's just take it day by day.
Yeah, so good. And I saw that, obviously had fantastic start. You had the pink jersey after the first stage, after the prologue. You lost it, and then you were back up there again on GC. You slipped over a period of time, and then with the second time trial, it catapulted you back up to third place. And then how was the week sort of defending the final week of the race, defending that third place on GC?
Yeah, that's when it got really juicy. If you remind ourselves, the Seiko team were having a bit of an internal struggle, and that just blew the race to pieces. You couldn't really, and there's no way to sort of understand what was happening in the race. Just stuff was happening left, right, and centre. The thing that saved me was that the big mountain stages were quite short. So in effect, they just turned into these small time trials in themselves. I'd get dropped early on the climb, I'd time trial at the top, I'd time trial down the hill, catch the group, get dropped on the next one, and repeat. So I was able to maintain connection in that front pack purely because of that shortness of those key mountain stages. All the kilometres we gained were in the long flat stages. Reminding ourselves, Pataki, I think he won like 9 stages that year.
What's the big difference between riding a Grand Tour when you're just targeting a stage win early or you're playing the role of team support versus being the guy that's trying to hold on and finish inside the top 10 or even finish on the podium overall?
It's definitely different. I wouldn't say it's necessarily easier. I think your GC guys, I've been privy to that, helping both on the bike and in DS roles. The real genuine GC guys, they go through that just terrible need to always be present. They cannot have a bad day. They can't have a bad hour. They're always on, and that is just soul destroying over the course of the period of time, the prep and the actual race. But then that said, and Gero would attest to this, when you go in there targeting stages, you need to go all in on a particular day or two. And when you go all in on one day, the following days can be absolutely terrible. There's no worse place than being legless in the middle of a GC because you've gone all in. And even worse if you actually didn't get the results when you did go all in. So they've got their challenges.
When you reflect on your career and you look at the success that you had at the Olympics in that year in 2004, the successes that you had at the Tour, the leaders jersey as well at the Vuelta, where does finishing top 10 overall in the Giro d'Italia sit in your mind amongst your career achievements?
Oh, it's something I'm really proud about, and the campaign, as it turned out to become a campaign, the people that were involved, we built like lifelong sort of connections. We went really exceptionally over the expectations, and we did that together. And I'll put one name on the table, and that's Matty Wilson. He was literally my right arm. He was my team. There were some other riders in there. They had their own agenda. Brad wasn't hanging around for very long, so why would we support him? But Matt was my roommate. He was my mate on the road. And with Matt and his support, I was able to do something that was quite exceptional. And we catch up every now and then. We just caught up recently and, pull out a few old war stories and have a good laugh. But that was an exceptional connection that we made early on. And that really enabled me to get the result because Matty was all in my support. It was fantastic.
I believe there was one day where you had the squirts and he loaned you a glove.
I just recently caught up with Matty and we were laughing. He was telling my kids. The scenario was I've come up to Matt and said, Matt, I need to go. And he goes, yeah, fine. Hang it out. We'll push you. I said, no, I really need to go. He's like, Macca, there's 40K to go and the tempo's chopping off at 45K an hour. It's you can't go. The race is on here. Hilltop finish, Matty. I need to get rid of some weight. Anyway, after a bit longer discussion, I said, Matt, you just go and get some teammates. You're going to need some help. I'm going to start trying to derobe here so I can get this job done as quickly as possible. And then once it's done, get me back in the bunch and I'll finish the day. He came back with young Francis Moret, a little French guy. I think the only reason he came back, he didn't understand a word of Matt's French. So Francis and Matty are my teammates. They're stopped out front of where I had to get the job done. And we're off. We're racing. 3-man time trial trying to get back into this race. And we are behind the last ambulance. The race is gone. Nothing but dust. So we're chopping off because we're getting dropped. Like they've even, lend a hand or two. We've come into a little city and the three of us have gone down on a corner, dusty corner, like gone down like sacks of potatoes. We're just laying there momentarily thinking, what have we got ourselves into? Just basically crying at the situation. But we had to get up and keep going. Eventually we get back in the bunch. Eventually they put me out the front of the bunch. We hit the hill. And apart from a little Cunego on the form of his life, I would have won the stage, finished second. Rolling back down the hill as you do towards the bus, and Matty's coming up in the hoop group, 30 minutes down, and I'm all excited. I wanted to, let him know I've got second, Matty. I've got second. And the death look that he gave me still resonates today. He he was so beside himself still because of this situation we got ourselves into. I think it's a little bit of a clink in our friendship still to this day. Yeah, you've probably been there as helping others, but our friendship is strong, but it was really tested that day.
You got to go.
Well, there's nothing surer than an untimely toilet stop will really upset your teammates when you are the team leader because they know they've got a heck of a lot of work to do to make up for that. But one name you just mentioned there, Damiano Cunego. So the 2004 Giro was his breakout result as a professional. But the top 10 was basically all Italian teams, riddled with Italians. There must have been a heck of a battle going on for the GC.
Yeah, absolutely. In particular, inside Seiko, the two teammates there just going head to head. So you couldn't predict what was going to happen on any day. And that sort of helped a little bit. For myself, I was like, well, we can't predict it. So let's just focus on what the train's coming up and how can we control the controllables. But it was almost like there was another race going on at the same time, which I wasn't really partaking in. I was just trying to get to Milan as quick as possible. And then all these other shenanigans were going on amongst the Italians. It was quite comical at times.
And then later on that year, you had the Athens Olympics where you picked up a gold medal in the team's pursuit, silver medal in the individual pursuit. Is 2004 the best year of your career?
Yeah, I also tried to pick up an olive tree, Matt, just after the Giro on my balcony and threw my back out. So there was highs and lows of that year. I'd gone on to win the Route du Sud just after the Giro, and following that was the famous olive tree incident, and it put me on my ass literally from that moment on till the Olympics. My son was born. I was in and
you've
out.
Done no gardening since.
Well, yeah, I've picked it up in recent time. I'm getting old now. And it threw my whole. I basically didn't train between that moment and Tokyo, and the Olympics in Athens, and it was a real strain. And it was literally, even though it was the pinnacle of my career, it was also the start of the end because I never recovered from that back injury.
Right. It's an extraordinary performance, a top 10 in a Grand Tour stage win. As Gero said, I think you were second on 3 stages, third on another, and then later that year you won Olympic Games gold medal. Brad, thanks for joining us. We look forward to coming past your place when we're up in Kiama at the end of the year for L'Etape Australia by Tour de France.
As do I, fellas. Looking forward to it, and thanks for your time. It's been great to chat.
Thanks, Brad.
Well, there is Brad McGee, Gero, 8th in a Grand Tour. That is impressive. He's played a pretty important role since retiring as a sports director, looking after the likes of Alberto Contador, working with the Australian road team as well. But as you mentioned at the start there, he's the first Australian rider to wear the leaders jersey in all 3 Grand Tours. 2003, the Tour de France, the yellow jersey. 04, the Giro d'Italia with the pink. And then in 2005, at the Volta de España, then it was a gold jersey. That is impressive.
Yeah, he certainly is. And McGee was a fantastic mentor for the younger riders coming through. So Bradley's a few years older than myself. He lived in the south of France when I moved down there, and he was the sort of guy who really took young guys under the wing and helped them along. His wife Shani as well was fantastic, and they were kind of the parents for a lot of people away from home. They were that older, some more experienced couple down in the area, and they were fantastic to me and many other young riders.
On the topic of young riders, here is one to watch. Here is Neve Bradbury. Well, Neve Bradbury, I've had the pleasure of actually racing against you once. It was online, it was on Zwift. And at the end of it, I think it was the chop on a Thursday night. You beat me. I think you finished 9th. I might have finished 11th or 13th. And I sent your dad a message straight away. Another generation of Bradburys beating me. It's not fair.
Well, I mean, it's on Zwift. Maybe in real life he would have beaten me.
Not sure. Zwift has been a really important part of the progress of your career and now being with the World Tour.
Yeah, exactly. During lockdown, Zwift was really beneficial to me. I could do most of my training on it since we could only go riding outside for an hour each day. And then I did Zwift Academy. I got into Canyon SRAM.
Was it something that you thought about prior to lockdown last year of going and trying to get into the Zwift Academy?
Yeah, it was always in the back of my mind a little bit, but I didn't think I'd be able to get it at all.
Why?
I'm not even the best in Australia, let alone the best Zwift rider in the world.
I've seen the footage of your mum and dad reacting when you got announced as the rider to join Canyon SRAM. I've got a pretty good idea how excited they were, and as a parent as well. How excited were you?
Oh, yeah, I was stoked. I mean, I'm not sure I was quite excited as them. But it's like the dream come true.
Going back to where it all started, how did you get started on the bike?
So when I was around 12 or 13, my dad, brother, and sister were all riding. And I was just watching all every day, like just kind of sick of watching. And my twin sister Isla, she really wanted me to race, and so she was like, she offered me all of the $80 if I started racing with her. So I took that up. I started racing. I never got the money, but I'm still here, and I'm grateful for Isla for offering me her $80, even though she didn't give it to me.
Well, there's two elements of that. You started life as a professional athlete, go hunting a little bit of prize money, and secondly, a reality of how brutal professional sport can be when your sister didn't even pay up.
Yeah, exactly.
It must have been a great experience to go training with your dad and your brother as well, and your sister. It must have been a great bonding experience as a family.
Oh yeah, Saturday, Sunday rides with the family. It's really nice. Working up to races. They're not riding so much anymore, but
Was your dad? I know your dad reasonably well. Was he nervous about you racing?
yes. He didn't actually want us to race bikes when we were young, or like at all, just because he knows how brutal it is. He's been through it. But yeah, that didn't end very well. We started.
Yeah, as a parent as well, with my kids, my policy is that I will offer them every other sport. Do you want to try netball? Do you want to try horse riding? Do you want to try
Yeah.
tennis, football? But I'm never going to offer them cycling because
Yeah.
they'll have enough exposure to it anyway. Was it a big part of your life when you were younger? Like, dad having ridden with the Australian Institute of Sport and so on. Was that part of your life? You were aware of it when you were really young?
No, not really. Dad never talks about how good he used to be. Really, like he's probably won so many races I don't even know about. He was like quite good, but he never talked about it. I didn't even know really what it was until I started.
Yeah, he never talked himself up when he was at his best either, I can assure you. I shared a room with him a few times, a lot of bike races. He was a humble champion, your dad. Now that
Yeah.
he's 40, I think he's 47 years of age or 48 years of age, your dad. I think he's 1 year
Uh,
older than me. When you go training with him now, do you get a bit of an understanding of how strong he is?
sometimes. He rides very occasionally now. So
Good. Well,
my
I
zone
better go
2
for a
ride
ride with
is,
him then.
pardon?
I better go for a ride with him then,
Yeah.
get one back.
I reckon you might have him right now.
Awesome.
Now is
What's
your
it
chance.
been? What's it been like for you to be accepted into the Canyon SRAM team?
They've been very welcoming. They're great. It's really nice having people from all around the world, different views and on life, and yeah, it's great.
And you spoke about it pretty early on in the piece when you joined the team that Tiffany Cromwell was one of your childhood heroes, and now you get the chance to ride with her. They
Yeah.
always say never meet your heroes, but has this worked out all right?
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be really cool. I'm actually racing with her to Valencia, which starts on Thursday. So I haven't raced with her yet, but that will be really cool.
That would be a great experience. So where are you
Yeah.
based at the moment?
I'm based in Girona, living with Ella Harris, my teammate.
And the Spanish lifestyle suiting you well?
Yeah, it's great. Coffee,
What's the
ride, coffee.
perfect? What are some of the biggest races that you've done so far this year?
So I started with Dwars du Vlaanderen. A week after I got there in Belgium, then did Skelde Prize, Brabantst, and I just did Elsie Jacobs tour a few days ago.
What's the biggest difference that you notice between doing, say, National Road Series race in Australia versus those World Tour level races?
Just the pure numbers. Riding with 150 riders rather than 40.
And how do you find the fight for position, trying to get yourself to the front and you're rubbing shoulders, and you could look across and you might be rubbing shoulders with Anna van der Breggen, the world champion.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty cool. But it is definitely tough trying to stay at the front. Being in position is so hard. But
With what you've learned so far in this early part of the season, what are your ambitions? What do you think you can achieve?
oh, I don't know. Hopefully, it's probably a fair way away, but hopefully I can win a tour or something. But right now I'm just trying to, get to the front and help my teammates in some way.
So, for somebody that's never seen your race before and they've never met you, how would you describe yourself as a cyclist?
I think I'm more a climber, but probably not like a pure climber. I can kind of sprint at the end of a really long stage. Okay, maybe.
From what I've seen so far, you're a rider who can do a little bit of everything. I've enjoyed the start of your career. You're only 19 years of age. I'm looking forward to watching the rest of the development of it. Well done on what you've achieved so far, and good luck for the rest of your career, not just this season.
Great, thanks, Matt.
Well, Garo, Neve Bradbury making it through to the pro peloton on the Canyon SRAM team via the Swift Academy, which worked out pretty well for a lot of people in 2020 with the COVID lockdowns. You'd get a little bit nervous about somebody at 19 years of age going through to the pro peloton from an indoor platform. But with the heritage of Neve, and you know her dad pretty well, there's nothing to worry about.
No, not at all. Now, I remember Neve and her sister Isla when they first started racing a few years ago. I think they're only about 12 or 13 at the time, but that wasn't that long ago because she's only 19 and now she's racing in the Women's World Tour. So I really wish her well, and I think she's going to have an outstanding career.
Yeah, so do I. Watch this space. Time to wrap things up with our rapid fire questions, and it is a strong sporting theme, and you're going to have to make some tough decisions between big sporting events. First up, the Super Bowl or the World Cup final?
Big sporting event for me as an Australian. The World Cup final, the Super Bowl. I've never really followed American sports too closely. We've seen Australia sort of get up there in the Football World Cup there. I think it was in 2006. I come now with a son who's obsessed with soccer. So we're watching a lot more soccer in our house than we'll ever will American sports. So for me, it's the World Cup final.
I'm with you. I'm 100% the World Cup final. It's tribal, even though the odds of Australia making the final are pretty slim. I love the idea of being in the stadium for Brazil versus Argentina, something along those lines. It would be enormous.
Next question, Maddie. I'm going to start with you with this one. The Melbourne F1 GP or the Phillip Island MotoGP? What are you going to watch?
MotoGP in Phillip Island, hands down. I get all the hype around the Formula One and it's the glitz and glamour, but I know that circuit around Phillip Island and the vision of them just cresting the hill and you can see the ocean in the backdrop and the risk, the danger. I'm at the MotoGP every day of the week and I'm just about going to put my house on it that you're going to be there with me.
Yeah, we had a question there. I watched the MotoGP religiously. I was so happy to see Jack Miller win the Spanish GP just last weekend. I've known Jack for a number of years, so I was so thrilled to see him get the win up. And for me, it's MotoGP again, any day of the week, just like you.
Okay, next up, the Cricket World Cup final for the limited overs or Baseball World Series final game?
Cricket. In a second. Again, never really followed American sports too closely. I did go and watch a baseball game when I was at a training camp in the US a few years ago, so I have experienced that. It is a pretty cool atmosphere, but a very slow game, maybe even slower than cricket.
Yeah, and for that reason, I'm going with you to the cricket because baseball, it is the peak of slow sport.
That is a pure endurance sport for spectators. You're in for the long haul. Unlike probably the polar opposite of that, two of the shortest events going around. Matt, what are you going with? The 100-meter final at the Olympics or a track sprint for race for gold at the Olympic Games?
Okay, so athletics 100 meters versus cycling and the sprint on the track at the Olympics. I feel a little dirty saying this, Gero. I'm going to the 100 meters for the Olympic final.
Yeah, me too. Listen, I love cycling. I'm a passionate cyclist. I've always followed the sport. Got a number of mates racing on the track. But the 100-meter sprint at the Olympic Games is probably the biggest sporting event on the planet. So if I had the choice to watch the two, I'm going to watch the 100-meter sprint as well.
Yeah, it's the best 9.5 seconds in sport.
That's true. The best 9.5 seconds in sport. Okay, now this one, as a tennis fan, Matty, this one's for you. What are you going to win? If you were to win one of these...
I'm going to go watch them.
Wimbledon? No, but if you're going to win one,
okay.
You're a tennis player now. Wimbledon or Roland Garros final?
Oh, okay. Can I have two answers? I will win Wimbledon for the history, but I'd rather go and watch the Roland Garros final. I love the red dirt. Love it. And I want to see Nadal at 57 years of age still in the final.
And the way he's going, there's every chance he might be there.
What about you,
mate? Either way, I'm not that avid a tennis fan, not that avid a follower. After living in London for a couple of years, I wasn't that far down the road from Wimbledon, so I'm going to go for Wimbledon.
Okay, and in this year, I'd rather go to Roland Garros and watch the women's final with Ash Barty collecting a second trophy rather than going to the Wimbledon final.
Same. I'm going to go and support an Aussie any day of the week.
Awesome. Gero, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for on this episode. I'm looking forward to the Giro d'Italia getting underway, and let's see whether Max Gawn's top 38 comes to fruition.
I'm looking forward to it too. Matt, enjoy the Giro, and I look forward to checking in again soon.
Thanks for listening to Cycling Insights, L'Etape Australia by the Tour de France podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to us. Leave us a review and recommend us to your friends. It makes a big difference for the podcast. We'll see you on the road.